Jacksonville, the child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. Poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, our episode, The Week That Was, on the 19th of January, 2020. We are doing a few things, a little bit of gymnastics with some of our presentations. The Monday morning quarterback, which is normally posted on Monday mornings, it will be posted later on Monday. The reason for that is we want to capture the gun rights / lobbying day episode in Richmond, Virginia. Monday is, of course, Dr. King's birthday, and happy birthday to Dr. King. But in Virginia, it's traditionally also a lobbying day. One legislature from Molasses, Virginia, is not there because his life has been threatened by various right-wing elements on social media. Thus, it's a firebox episode. The governor has declared martial law, basically speaking, a state of emergency. The Capitol grounds are fenced off. The Virginia law enforcement people will be out in great numbers. They will not allow guns in the area of the Capitol, nor in the Capitol there. So we'll be covering that and look at how it is evolving there in Virginia. As a news item, we'll get it all wrapped up in there, and we'll wrap up the meaning of King Day. We'll do all of these at one period. And also on Tuesday, a little bit of a preview. We'll see if we can get this in, and maybe we'll have a separate. I'm not certain about that as of yet. On the incoming impeachment, we'll look at the briefs that have been filed. On the reason for impeachment, there was an answer filed by the Republicans. So we'll see how we'll handle that from a news standpoint, period. This is, of course, Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. So we'll look to those, and our coverage will, today on the Women's March, which was over the weekend, from Los Angeles to Washington, and there were less in numbers than previous marches. Of course, previous marches were organized by different people. Tamika Malloy was not there this time around, nor was Linda LeSueur, and I think it's Brad Brand. Those were four of the founders of the Women's March. they of course resigned, and the reason that they resigned was over some very unfortunate politics. They were accused of being anti-Jewish because of their opposition to the Zionist state of Israel, and their attendance at meetings where the Honorable Honorable Louis Farrakhan, the minister from Chicago, was speaking. So what had happened was the corporate media and various stakeholders within the Women's Party were able to blow this out of proportion and able to move the movement out of its original founding ideas. Now, the demonstrators that were out on Saturday, many of them from the stories were first-timers, which is good. It was grassroots. It was different. There was no Madonna. If you listen to our Friday Jobber program, we always have Madonna there talking about the struggle ahead. Now, that was a struggle when they had their large women's march in history on the in early 2017, after the election of DJ Trump, before he was inaugurated. There they had their march, and of course he was inaugurated the next week. But that march goes down in history, and there's no reason to separate the historical significance of the Women's March. And this week we also have the World Economic Forum that will be in Davos, Switzerland, appearing there. A number of people, our own Greta Thunberg, she will be speaking there amongst other people that will show up in Davos. It's supposedly even DJ Trump might show up. Who knows? I mean, he's got activities all over the world, including this impeachment situation. Now, the impeachment situation is political. That's one thing people have to understand. It's a political process. The Senate will be both the jury and the court. In other words, they are the court because they will establish the rules of engagement, period. It is up to the Senate. The Constitution has allotted them that particular situation. Yet they also sat as a non-partisan group to judge the charges against the president. Now, when you come out of all this, very interesting situation, the rules of evidence, civil rules of evidence on the federal rules of evidence do not apply. But yet you have the lawyers for the president talking about due process, and they're also, we'll get more into this when we look at their situation, they're saying that the entire impeachment process is not constitutional. Period. Well, what has happened is a political flippable. They are saying that they are not afforded due process, but at the same time they have effectively withheld evidence. In other words, witnesses that would be available to actual events were prohibited by the Trump administration from testifying or submitting statements, etc. So if you don't have the witnesses to your actual events, so what do you do? Well, that becomes somewhat of a problem. Jonathan Turley, he's a constitutional scholar that emerges from the right-wing pool pocket, so to speak, saying, well, wait more time and go through the courts. The only problem they would have going through the courts, it could have lagged on and then just made the whole impeachment process obsolete, because there was an election in November. How quickly it would have went through the courts is very difficult to tell. They could have filed for expedited certiorari to the Supreme Court, and then a hearing could have been held almost immediately. That would have been one particular situation. Now, in civil litigation, there is, particularly out of an administrative procedure, not that this is an administrative procedure, there's a theory of ripening or ripeness. What you basically want to do is gather as much evidence as you can through your discovery process, motions to compel testimony, etc., etc. That is all in the discovery process prior to trial, and that's effectively where the House of Representatives, although the House did hold some hearings, evidentiary hearings, but they were not able to hold full evidentiary hearings because they could not get witnesses that they needed, nor their what would be the equivalent in a civil litigation. Production orders were not honored. So in other words, the House does have a range of activities. They can go to the district court and hold a person in contempt of Congress. That has occurred before, and the person can be jailed. But in fights with the executive branch, effectively what you have is, in the U.S., the way the government is set up, you have three distinct branches. The legislative branch, which is Congress, the executive branch, which is the Trump administration, and you have the courts. Much, I wouldn't say debate, but journeys back through history. What would have happened if Nixon had disobeyed the order of the court, or if he had been actually impeached? He was not. He resigned. But had he been impeached, and the Senate would have tried him and convicted him, and what if he said, well, I'm not leaving town? Then you'd have a constitutional crisis. You'd be pitting the executive branch against the Congress and the judiciary. Now, this happened in other nations. That it happened in Chile with El Salvador Allende, and he had the legislative process and the executive. But in that case, the courts were the problem, and of course it resulted in a military coup under Augustus Pinochet. But the U.S. did not want to go that direction, therefore immediately Tricky Dick moved in the other direction. Let's go to the Los Angeles Times, and we'll get the Women's March there in Los Angeles in kind of a little capsule presentation here. This is by Colleen Shelby and Julia Barkas and Alex Wigsworth. Anyway, diminished in numbers but not in spirit, thousands of marchers took to the streets of downtown Los Angeles. That was on Saturday to advocate for reproductive rights, immigration reform, environmental justice, and other issues as part of the 4th Women's March. The crowd congregated at Pershing Square, named after General Pershing, anyway, and marched to City Hall for a 2-hour program featuring none other than Auntie Maxine Waters and Karen Bass. She's a representative from Los Angeles. 2 African-American women and the Mayor Garcetti. Similar marches, of course, were in D.C., Frisco, New York, Chicago, and places in between. The crowd gathered there at Pershing Square wasn't as large as in years past, but it slowly began to grow throughout the morning. More than 300,000 people marched and gathered downtown for the march. That's according to the Women's March Foundation. Some of the demonstrators dressed in early 20th century attire in observation of the 100th anniversary of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution that gave women the right to vote. And OGYN from Beverly Hills named Jennifer Lang said she was a bit dismayed by the reduced numbers, especially during the presidential election year, but believes important turnout. Here we are. A little bit of a conflict in this article, diminished numbers, so we don't know the numbers, but it's not as important as they actually appeared there. She recalls how her grandmother marched for rights to access birth control prior to Roe v. Wade, which was in the early 70s, in keeping with generations before her. Lang, I hope I got her name and not Long, Lang, her 11-year-old daughter, Shelley, to the march to continue the family's tradition of and legacy of marching. We are taking on the drive here about how crazy it is that we are marching for the same issue, Lang said. And here's a picture of Jennifer Lang and her daughter. I put this up there in downtown Los Angeles. Lang, who held a sign that read, "We are the granddaughters of the witches you weren't able to burn," was the first women's march in D.C. following DJ Trump's inauguration in 2017. Her mother said she hoped 2020 election will bring a different outcome than the 2016. Garcia, president of the Women's March Foundation Los Angeles, said that 60% of those who marched were first-time participants. Among them were more than a dozen students from Echamos Leadership High School. That's in Inglewood, California. Empower women. We are not ovarian acting. And various others here. Arvedo Barber, 17, also a Mexican flag, and wore a denim jacket embossed with the United Farm Workers logo for him and his community. He said feminism must be intersectional, pointing back to the bright pink clothes hangers that hung from his jacket. He added, "We are here for immigrants' rights, of course, but we are also here to mobilize for reproductive rights, particularly low-cost access to services for people of color." Hangers were provided by Robin McCarthy, a graphics designer from Silver Lake, who, with the help of 3 friends, were handing them out to free to marches at the corner of 5th and Hill, just across from Pershing Square. Using their own money, they had 4,000 hangers made for the occasion. Very good there. And by 10:15, the crowd had gathered by the hundreds to march to City Hall. Kicked off 3-2-1 count. Women and men, dogs of all sizes, were in the march. Sounds of drum beating and chants. This is what a democracy looks like, as house music and 90 years hip-hop played in the background. So a very descriptive situation of what happened in the march. The group of women had their routine down on the eve of the march. They made the final touches on the outfit in the style of Alice Paul and Susan B. Anthony. Yes, Republicans want to own patriotism. Cyber, a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, said, but there's no reason why being out here is un-American. Women say their mission is to promote support for Democratic candidates in 2020, whoever they may be. Their focus is to push for equality and ensure that their votes are heard. Jill Darling, who was at the march for the 4th consecutive year, simply carried a sign reading Amy Dim Adult 2020 on a personal level. She said she would love to see a President Amy Klobuchar. Not a bad idea, but she also has been a pragmatic voter, saying, "Darling, we have to do this year to get Trump out of office." So no doubt about that. Let me get this Delta airline, a jet fuel situation in here. Another photo of this school. Unfortunately, a lot of Latinos are involved here. A student named Marianne Torres, she's 11, at the center of evacuated Park Avenue elementary school. It's been days since the Delta jet experiencing engine trouble, showering homes and schools in southeast Los Angeles with fuel, but also Aldo Marico has continued to have breathing difficulty breathing. Marico lives on Santa Ana Street in Cudahy, just a few hundred feet from Park Avenue Elementary School. He says he has suffered from allergies for years, but his lingering breathing issues have made him nervous. I would say it's getting worse. He said he plans to see a doctor if his symptoms don't improve. He should see a doctor anyway. Tuesday's incident sparked outrage in Erie, which has long been at the center of environmental injustice. It also prompted concerns for residents who are uncertain about the long-term health and environmental impact of jet fuel exposure. In response to complaints, the South Coast Air Quality Management District sent an inspector to study the air quality in the neighborhood. Long overdue. Notice of the violations can result in civil penalties. In some cases, the company can choose to implement voluntary measures. The Los Angeles Fire Department hazmat team in the LA Unified School District also has performed air tests at several locations around the school. The commercial plane burned Jet A and Jet A1 fuel, which contains a mixture of hydrocarbons and kerosene-type product, period. Readings were consistently below the limit detection for jet fuel chemicals. That's from a doctor there, Cyrus Reagan, director of the LA Public Health Toxic Epidemiology Department, wrote an email. At this time, odors have dissipated, which is consistent with the chemical characteristics of kerosene-based fuel. Federal Aviation Administration is investigating. Still, the Department of Public Health, the County Fire Department, the Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Department of Agriculture are continuing their investigations. The symptoms can include skin and eye irritation, headaches, dizziness, reproductive irritation, according to the Health Protection Agency, in the United Kingdom. The International Agency for Research on Cancers also concluded there's inadequate evidence to classify kerosene as a human carcinogenic. Studies looking at jet fuel exposure amongst military personnel suggest it can affect the nervous system, but that research involved people who worked around fuel consistently over a long period of time. A little bit different situation there. Students who were exposed to the fuel vapor on Tuesday were sent home with instructions to clean themselves with soap and water, to thoroughly wash the clothing that they were wearing at the time. The health department suggested that people discard their clothing if the odor continues to linger after several washings. Well, the students here, in fact, not only should wash the clothing, but they should, in a place like Los Angeles, hang the clothing out in the open air if they can. Anyway, little medical advice. While some of the students returned to school the next day, a few parents kept children at home for an additional extra day just to be safe. That is from Delina Vasquez, who has students at the Park Avenue Elementary School. You can tell this is a Latino name from the people that are there. When a plane is forced to turn back after takeoff, the weight of a full load of fuel carries a risk of damaging the jet, potentially causing safety issues during landing. That is from Thomas Anthony, director of USC's Aviation Safety and Security Program, and he's a former FAA investigator. Even if there isn't any damage, Anthony said, the airlines that try to avoid landing overweight because the situation forced them to inspect the plane, which would be put out of service. Financial incentive. In some cases like this, if the plane lands full of gas, you have to apply the brakes quickly, and you can burst a tire there. And well, yes and no, but the whole situation is that they did get the plane landed. They were supposed to dump the fuel where there were not people. That was not done in this case. A very unfortunate situation here. And looking at an article here, it was written prior to with Carlene Shelby of the staff. This is the 100-year anniversary there. The march was coming up since the first worldwide, that was in 2017. Now this is the four original three. This is Bob Brand, Tamika Mallory, and Linda Censure. Stepped down following reports of infighting. Now this is a little bit different here. The national reports of infighting, money mismanagement, controversy over the attendance of events hosted by the Nation of Islam. Anyway, they use that as the situation there. But there had been pressure on these people from the very beginning of what was going on here. And this is one of the unfortunate situations here. And Gloria Allred was there. She's up today representing the people that got the kerosene dumped upon them, and some others there, Catalina Jenner, and some forth there, Ray Cruz, and Jennifer Lewis, and so forth and so on. Anyway, these were the people out in Los Angeles on the empowerment that was going on there, and various others. Anyway, this is the end of that. Let's move on here. And as we normally do here, we covered the Richmond story. I want braces for giant gun rights rally here. This is in the Washington Post. Convoys and militias are coming, if social media posts to believe, heading to the Capitol there in Richmond to take a stand for so-called gun rights. I'll be rolling into town earlier. I can't give you my exact time for security reasons. That's Christian Yelling, the head of the Pennsylvania Lightfoot Militia. Unite the Right was a leader at the Unite the Right rally that was in 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia. I organized a convoy, place we can meet up and drive up together. I'll be leading. This is Tommy Lee, a militia activist in Oklahoma. Both Lee and Yelling were members of the group that signed consent decrees to never to return to Charlotte while armed. Part of a lawsuit settled there, but there are no restrictions against coming to Richmond. Thousands will join them, they say, for the ride. That was on Monday at the state capitol to protest the new Democratic majority in the General Assembly to pass gun control laws. State and federal officials were preparing for a volatile mix of weapons, passions, anti-government favor, and Central Richmond was bracing for road closures, extensive police presence there, and your Second Amendment is on to. See, this is what happens when DJ Trump tweets things of this nature. The old argument about the Second Amendment. The problem with that is that the Second Amendment does not extend gun rights. It talks about militias, but these were militias in the 1700s. Totally different situation from private people having guns, and it's been deliberately misinterpreted. And that's what happens when you vote for Democrats. They will take your guns away. They haven't taken anybody's guns away. Republicans will win Virginia in 2020. That is so the governor has issued a ban on firearms and other weapons on the state capitol grounds. Supreme Court upheld the ban. And the Federal Aviation Administration used a temporary flight restriction for Richmond airspace, making it illegal to fly planes or drones above the city on Monday. Said officials are concerned about threats from weaponized drones. Another problem they got going here. And they've also charged 3 members of a white supremacist group called the Base. Period. From the Virginia Citizens Defense League. It's a pro-gun advocacy group. Sponsors what has been a peaceful rally every year on Lobby Day, and this is what we talking when we came in here, which coincides with the state's Martin Luther King holiday, with children out of school, state officials, state offices closed. It's time for citizens to come and lobby. The Virginia Citizen Defense League has applied for 10,000 supporters to show up unarmed to fill the Capitol Square. Norton told all non-essential staff to stay home. Many lawmakers urged their aides to do the same. The Coalition to Stop Gun Violence canceled its annual vigilance and lobbying, announcing on Twitter with heavy hearts. The director there, Laurie Haas, said it was because of ongoing credible threats to public safety by gun extremists. Any group that comes to Richmond to spread white supremacy garbage and any other form of violence and civil unrest isn't welcome here. That's the House Minority Leader Tom Gilbert. He's from Shenandoah. Said in a written statement, while we and our Democratic colleagues may have differences, we are all Virginians and we stand united in opposition to any threat of violence or civil unrest from any quarter. Outside the Capitol, authorities used tall chain-link fence barriers to create a pie-shaped pin of a rally. The area takes up about a third of the state capitol, dotted with historic figures from Native Americans to George Washington. The square is usually open on all sides for traffic. Anyway, that will be what is happening in Virginia on Monday. The hoopla is focused on the promises by Norton to enact sweeping gun control this year, including limiting handgun purchases to one per month. Well, that does make sense. Banning military-style weapons and silencers. You don't use those to hunt deer. More than 110 cities, counties around the state have passed some type of resolution in support of many of gun rights. They call themselves Second Amendment sanctuaries. The fact of the matter is what's happened here. You have in the urban areas of Virginia surrounding Washington, about 10% of the people have gun permits. And in rural Virginia, about 25%. You can see where that's going. But although it claims no interest in disrupting the rally, it called upon Virginia's Citizen Defense League to prevent racists and fascists from attending, and promises to always confront fascism there. That is an anti-fascist group. The yelling the Pennsylvania said he believes the turnout will be big. People are upset, and they should be. Said his militia on the streets in Charlottesville for rally in 2017. They said they were not backing the neo-Nazi who defended the statue of Lee. Lying. Yes, yelling anticipates violence. He blames Northam for that, limiting the access. Lee, the convoy leader from Oklahoma, has promised promoted original live videos. I'm absolutely not, cannot absolutely wait. She says, this is possible. Be the first time that almost entire patriot movement is there. But the video posted Friday, she also expressed dread. If you are not apprehensive about going to this event, then I would worry about you and your mental state and your thought processes. In the interview, said the convoy would kick off in Oklahoma on Saturday morning and swing through 10 states before it arrives in Richmond on a Sunday afternoon. She declined to say how many vehicles of people would be involved. No doubt the state police there will be watching them. She participated in nearly 50 rallies in the last 5 years, including in Charlottesville, which she attended as a member of the American Freedom Keepers. She later cut ties to that group, fighting over the dues, I guess. Anyway, Philip Van Cleve, president of the Virginia Citizens Defense League, said he toured the grounds with the Capitol Police on Friday to get a sense of the layout. He said he's hoping for a peaceful rally there. The thing that frustrates me, if something happens, that will be all people talk about. Van Cleve said, my view is we have no control. We are telling the police everything we know and trusting them to do their jobs. Well, hopefully they will, in fact, be able to do their jobs. That's a big question mark there. It always is a big question mark, and we'll see where we are. We were hoping to get the piece by Uncle Carl, who was here just a second ago, and we got it. Anyway, we'll go to Iowa, and let me just check out what time here. Okay. Oh, we're in good shape. Anyway, this is by Uncle Carl Rove, is writing as usual in the Wall Street Journal. The four-way race for Iowa is on June 16th. Tuesday, Democrats' debate in Iowa was a snoozer. Even the much-hyped conflict between Bernie Sanders and Liz Warren over whether he told her a woman can't be elected fell flat. Her refusal to shake his hands afterward was the closest thing the evening offered to real drama. The candidates reinforced positions we've heard many times before. The real question is who did the better or the worse than expected, and for the second consecutive debate, Amy Klobuchar shined brighter than forecast. It wasn't enough, however, to vote her into the first tier of candidates. The absence of game-changing moments isn't surprising. It's hard to score with 6 hopefuls on the stage, especially when the candidates are being cautious ahead of the Iowa caucuses. Transformative debates come when the focus is on a few candidates or an exchange cements someone's image for good in the middle of voting. This leaves political junkies scouting the latest polls to devise what might happen on the 3rd when the Iowa Democrats meet to kick off their party's 27 roller derby. If a car remembers roller derby, I don't think it's going on anymore. Opinion surveys can be confronting due to their precision, expressing complicated dynamics in numbers sometimes carried to the 10th of a point. That's taking it too far, but two recent highly respected polls, Salsa poll, Amy Salsa out of Des Moines, and the Monmouth University poll. Her poll was on the 2nd through the 8th of January, and the Monmouth poll was the 9th through 12th. The two polls coverage on many points has Sanders at 18, Bernie at 18, the most likely people, and Salsa has him at 20, and Mia Petey at 17 in the Monmouth, and at 16 in Salsa. Monmouth has Liz Warren at 15 and Salsa at 17. But the big divergence is on Joe Lunchbox Biden. Salsa poll has him at the Monmouth poll at 24, Salsa at 15. 9-point gap is at least 4 times the size of any between the surveys. It's also the difference between the first and fourth place for Biden. So why is this? Since primaries and caucus have smaller and more difficult population to survey than do general elections, we don't really know. YouGov, that's with CBS News, polled people from the 27th of December to the 3rd, finds a freer race between Biden, Sanders, and Mia Petey. The real clear average, politics average, 3 points place Biden is narrow lead with 20.7 to Sanders 20.3 tenths. So 4 tenths there, which is unlikely there will be a major change in public polling before the caucuses. The race is so closely bunched that even small changes could produce a much different outcome than the polls suggest. No doubt about that. We'll talk about that in a minute. There are 2 reasons. First, Iowans take seriously their participation in the first contest. Both Salsa and Mama find that 40% have firmly made up their minds, but 45% in the Salsa poll said they could be persuaded. 13% haven't made a choice. The compatible Mama poll numbers are 52% are still open and 5% with no choice yet. Second, Iowa Democratic Party rules say that if a caucus participant prefers candidate doesn't receive 15% of the vote at the attending precinct, they must choose another candidate or head home to await the final results. Also found 32% of the undecided are supporting candidates with less than 15% total. Monmouth has around 26%. These voters' second chance preferences are likely to be especially important. 2 recent polls provide conflicting guidance as to where these people will break when their candidates lose. Salsa says Warren gets 16% as a second choice, Mia Petey 15%, and Biden and Bernie Sanders at 12% each. Mama picks Warren at 23% as their second choice, voting her to first place. 15% said Mayor Pippin is their second choice, and 14% to Bernie Sanders, and only 10% to Biden, the same percent to Amy Klobuchar. Well, that's an interesting situation with the Iowa polling. There's no doubt that Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, I guess she's a senior senator now, is coming alive in Iowa. How much alive can she come? Well, she's been to the 99 counties across Iowa, and she got an endorsement from a newspaper in, I believe, the Quad Cities, major endorsement out there. So you always have to watch a candidate like that that's working out in the bush, in the rural areas, because she is from a neighboring state, and she has a possibility out in those areas of winning caucuses out there, because nobody goes out there. Most of the people around the larger cities, they're around Des Moines, basically there. Some are down to Iowa City, where the university is, and some of the larger hamlets in Iowa, and that's pretty much it, mostly around Des Moines, and the immediate areas around there. So if you can get out into the bush, it does count. You have retail politics in Iowa. People are accustomed to retail politics. I remember going there in the 70s, our first time into Iowa. And it is basically the same today, although it is magnified and intensified by social media. We didn't have that. We didn't have internet. We didn't even have mobile phones. Young people think, oh boy, this is something else. These characters were strictly on a string and 2 cans operation. Well, we did have phone booths. We could find those. They were plentiful if you were around where one was. Even in a rural area, you had to have a lot of coins. You didn't have a credit card. Let me see if you can use a credit card. Yeah, we didn't have very many credit cards. Anyway, you had a lot of coins in your pocket. You plugged them in. Anyway, won't get into that one with the old wire trick. Anyway, they'd say deposit, $5 in coins or whatever, and you call somebody up. Or call them collect. Anyway, so that was how we communicated with people at that time in history. But now the communication is instantaneous. We have apps on the phones that we can monitor the caucuses, report in very, very quickly. Each candidate to the command and control, and they can be in control. So those are some of the things now that we have that we did not even think of in the old time. So yes, the rural caucuses are very, very important in a rural state, and one that works out there can get some momentum, because what happens is when you're endorsed by newspapers, and rural communities tend to look to their newspapers more so than in urban areas, and the endorsement thing really most of the time doesn't mean anything. But yes, you get momentum at the last stage, and of course the senators will not be out there. They'll be sitting and twiddling their thumbs in Washington, D.C. That includes Senator Klobuchar, Senator Sanders, Senator Warren, and who else is a senator there? I guess we had 3 of them. I thought there were 4. Anyway, who are we leaving out here? We don't want to leave anyone out. But we have Lunchbox Joe Biden. He's not a senator. He's out of that. And we have Mayor Pippin and Tom Steyer. So that's what, 3 of them there that are out. Oh, and they mentioned another senator. Forget about him, Bennett, but he isn't in anything. So it didn't matter if he's there or not there, period. And the same goes of New Hampshire. So this thing is, but you still have a large percentage of people that could be persuaded. But usually they fudge on this. 45% said they could be persuaded. Most of those people, if they do caucus, have made up their minds. Some of them are with candidates who probably get less than 15%. But if we look at the so-called top tier, the only one that we at this mic see in some caucuses not getting 15% is Joe Lunchbox Biden of the top 3. Bernie and Liz Warren will get that. And so this is where Amy Klobuchar is there. I think in a lot of those caucuses, You will be matching her up against Joe Lunchbox Biden. And Mayor Peely, to a certain extent, how far does Mayor Peely go? Now, that's a very interesting situation, because he's polling in the single digits after you leave Iowa and New Hampshire. Would a second or third place, fourth place in either one of those states put him in good contention? That's a big question mark, because they go to Nevada and then to South Carolina, where he's not strong at all. And in Super Tuesday, he could get lost, as they say, in the machinery of the March 3rd primary. That's why it's important for the first tier and a fifth place or fourth place Amy Klobuchar to get to March the 3rd. Very important there. Now, out of Iowa, if these candidates were bunched up, it's not a winner-take-all. A third-place person could come out of there with a fair share of the votes. Everyone looks to first and second, who polls first, who polls second. We're looking very, very carefully at how Liz Warren does there. Will she stay in second place, or will she be in third place? And then that's a very important situation there as to how these votes finally turn out to actually be. We'll continue this discussion on the Monday morning quarterback period. The Monmouth poll has 52%. I think that's over there. That would be half of the caucuses there are open. Which the question would ask there, I'm looking at the candidates now: Tom Steyer, Liz Warren, Joe Lunchbox Biden, Bernie Sanders, Liz, Amy Klobuchar, and Mayor Peely. So that's 6 of them up there. 3 of them will be in the Senate, which means that Tom Steyer, and he's a billionaire, can run amok. What he will get, who knows? And there's Andrew Yang, who wasn't on the stage. So there are a lot of people that did not make the stage, could be in a serious consideration. We just simply don't know at this time in history where these people will go. And another from the Washington Post, and we'll conclude our discussion here. The path for Iowans to pick the presidential candidate is filled with twists. There's no doubt about that. A lot of twists and turns in Iowa. This is by Karen Tumley. Curiosity brought Cindy Fairclough to former Maytag headquarters. That's in Newton, Iowa, where Mayor Peely made his little stop. She lives in Kellogg, 10 miles away. As we sat next to each other, waiting for the ex-mayor to take the stage, Fairclough told me she has been an enthusiastic supporter of DJ Trump at the time, and seemed a comfortable fit for a social conservative who opposed abortion, same-sex marriage. Old Fairclough is a retiree, has grown the reservations of the president. She's especially appalled at Trump's threat to prevent the military from disciplining Eddie Gallagher. He's the SEAL accused of war crimes. And this is where it's a curiosity here. Mayor Peely, a Naval Reserve veteran who served Afghanistan, was a kind of conciliatory message and even temperament that just pushes me over the edge. The caucus are technically open only to Democrats. Republican independents are allowed to participate if they switch their registration. Now, I guess in Iowa didn't. Some places you can, some places you can. Are these enough people like her? This is what old Mayor Peely calls future former Republicans. You can see where his particular situation is going. Everything's in motion. Polls seem to produce a new front runner, but the margins are narrowing. With just 2 weeks to go, it's more instructive to pay attention to how the high number of people, 60% of the latest survey, have yet to lock in their choice. This is of the Salsa poll there. On the other side sits Tiff Williams, an ordained minister who directs a Christian camp on the outskirts of Newton. she intended to support Cory Booker, who is not there, and not Donald Trump's not enough to get my vote. She says she's worried that another 4 years of Trump might end Obamacare, which reduces her monthly insurance costs from $1,500 to $350. Williams, a Democrat, left disappointed. She thought Buttigieg would take more questions from the audience rather than spend most of the event delivering a stump speech. Well, there we go. Fairclough and Williams are not a scientific sample, of course. They're simply two women who happen to sit next to an empty chair. I found a crowded campaign event. 3 of the 5 highest polling candidates, Bernie, Liz Warren, and Amy Klobuchar, will be spending most of their final days, of course, back at the Senate. In the 1999 impeachment trial of Bill Clinton, is any guide, Trump could stretch not only past Iowa, but it'd make it impossible for the Senate candidates to campaign. This is on the 11th of February in New Hampshire. They will be sending out surrogates to speak in these early states where impeachment rarely comes up as a question. That is one of the biggest problems that impeachment poses. For most of the nation, impeachment is not the number one item on the agenda, period. And that is where you have some problems. I was looking at a Pew poll. It's narrow, but at the same time, most of the people did not favor removal of DJ Trump. And on the issue of the killing of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, most of the people favored the action. I think it was 47 to whatever. But at the same time, people were hesitant about the policy itself, and you'll see much more of that. Nonetheless, we'll end this the week that was. This is Boston Radio Jerry Pippin broadcast booth on the 18th, actually, of January 2020. Good day and have a good week. We'll see you on an extended version of the Monday Morning Quarterback, which will be done after the rally, hopefully in Richmond, Virginia. Hope we'll be able to wrap that one up without a night of violence. Good day.